around this space would probably be challenging and obviously negatively affect the views that they get from that other building.
You know, one reason we gave this little talk today is to really have people focus and look at these buildings, because it's a vehicular street. You know, and you drive down so fast, you don't get to see what's really in the details on some of these buildings. You know, Broadway is that's why it's called Broadway, a wide street. It's broad. It's over 100 feet wide, and you lose that sense of urbanness and community like Andersonville has. Andersonville, right away from building to building, is 66 feet. So you have this small, tight scale to everything, and it feels like a little tight, little cute neighborhood, whereas Broadway's got this vehicular wide scale, and you lose some of the character and seeing a lot of this.
This was originally, it was providing vaults and safe deposit boxes and so forth. There was a very beautiful clock on a pole in front of the bank, but back in the 80s, I believe, that was relocated to Old Town, so that clock you see on Wells Street just south of North Avenue originally came from right here. So has anyone been on any of our walking tours? We've done walking tours on Broadway and a number of other areas for the last 5 years, and we get into a lot more detail on a lot of this stuff. But the best preserved section of Broadway is probably between Balmoral and Berwyn, but then also around Granville we have a high proportion of the original structure still there. We have lost a lot, and we'll talk about some of those later on. This is one of my favorites, just up on that same stretch there. This was originally a building that was built as a two-flat, so before the streetcar lines came through in the early 20th century, Broadway was principally what's called Broadway. It was Evanston Avenue, and it was primarily a residential street. Marcia Holland has dug up a lot of information on some of those buildings. This one was adapted and a new facade was put on. Very fancy facade for a very upscale photographer studio that opened in the 1920s. So again, amazing terracotta work, the mansard roof, all kind of really add to a very unique experience. Right next door you can see one of the original Greystone two flats.
Over on this side.
So,
yeah, very unique, highly detailed building with the barrel tile roof. Unfortunately, whoever renovated should not have put windows with that busy in a building like this. So you're not competing with the detail, you're just creating windows. So unfortunately those windows are a little too much for me on this building. Every time I look at it, all you see those windows, unfortunately.
Does the Harold Washington Library have the same detail on the top?
This detail here with these arches.
And the roof, I guess.
Oh, the mansard roof?
no, not really. I don't think it is. It's got a lot of unusual characteristics, but not quite that. And this, to me, has a slight Venetian flavor.
Yeah.
And a very regal door piece.
Yeah, unique serpentine terracotta columns.
Bricks.
Another, just moving up, the very much beloved Pasteur French Vietnamese restaurant. Again, another example of buildings that were originally two flats that were combined, and the new storefront was put on them many years ago, probably shortly after they were built.
Even though it was changed a lot, they did a great job of keeping some of the detail and charm and brackets and little cornices over the front, still keeping the charm, and that's one of the galvanized metal cornices up on the top there that they saved.
Here you can see that very large, multicolored apartment building, condo building that I referenced earlier. Does that building have a name, Tom? Does it?
I believe it was called the Catalpa Gardens building.
Catalpa Gardens.
Today.
It went through a lot of turbulence during its early years. So now we're up at the kind of the grand intersection of Broadway, the five-cornered intersection of Broadway, Bryn Mawr, and Ridge. Remarkably, 4 out of the 5 original corners still have the original structures. Each of those structures are quite unique and beautiful in their own way. This is probably the most prominent of them. As you're coming east on Ridge, you get a beautiful view of this building. Of course, they've monetized that view for many years now with the giant billboard on top of the building. And a lot of advertising over on the side as well.
Commonly known as Astoya's building. It's one of the oldest buildings on Broadway, 1898, I believe. And here's an example of where was a cornice up on the top, and they just carved over it. Now it's just a blank little line up on the top. There was a beautiful galvanized metal cornice up on the top of that building. But it anchors the National Historic District of Bryn Mawr.
So this intersection really has a lot of very old buildings. So this is another view on the Bryn Mawr side showing the very nice bays. So these were upscale apartments, and the whole concept of having a bay in an apartment was probably somewhat new at the time. Allows maximum light exposure on the north facade. But again, 1 story of commercial, 2 stories of residential, which was probably the most common massing back in the day, although there were some buildings that were a little taller, some that are obviously just 2-story. I think this is the oldest building at that intersection. This is probably one of the oldest buildings in Edgewater. It was modernized somewhat on the first floor with dubious results, but this is from 1892.
Right,
And
1892.
Tom, did you work on this building as well?
No, I didn't. You can tell I wasn't here.
Didn't mean to set you up like that. But they did.
1892, it's the oldest building on Broadway, designed by Joseph Silsby. Joseph Silsby was one of Cochrane, the developer of all of Edgewater, one of his architects. And Cochrane, pulled most of the permits on building and just put his name on it. He didn't really put the architect's name on it, so a lot of it's tough for us to really find. But Silsby designed this building, and you might know Silsby because one of his draftsmen was Frank Lloyd Wright, who was a draftsman and did some work at Silsby's office. But Frank didn't like the way Silsby designed things. He would create this beautiful, romantic, and charming exterior design and say, okay, draft boys, make the interior work. Here's what I want it to look like. I'm like, oh, that's not how you work. Just trying to fit an interior into some beautiful picture. So Frank worked there just briefly, but he definitely did some work for Cochrane, and also George Washington Mayer was one of the architects that Cochrane called on to do a lot of projects.
But they did a nice job of preserving the corner bay. I think some nice painting there to kind of highlight the various articulations and so forth. I don't know if that would have been considered an original color scheme, but I think it works. So. And the first floor, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if we have any photos in our archives, perhaps, that show what it might have originally looked like. But it's not obnoxious. It's not the worst. So that's on the southwest corner. And again, there's the write-up we have in our survey if you want to get a little more information about it. This was a boarding house in its original incarnation, so that's an interesting housing concept that's getting more relevant all the time. So this is the building over at the what that would be the northwest corner of Bryn Mawr and Ridge, which is currently housing the School of Rock.
Yes.
It's sat empty for many years, but a 2-story building, but it's one of those flat iron type buildings because it's kind of a triangular shape because of the street configuration. A lot of beautiful brickwork up at the top and a more modest cornice, probably out of limestone. The first floor, very flamboyant terracotta, which was not original to the building, but the building was remodeled, I think, in the teens. And that was added, so it kind of gussies it up a bit.
But it is one of the oldest buildings on the tour, 1895.
Probably the most underappreciated and underloved buildings at the intersection is this one on the northeast corner. It's actually two buildings that kind of blend into one. We have I think, the highly underrated Mexican restaurant here on the corner. If you haven't been in there, I think it's one of the last bargain restaurants left in Edgewater. So, this is all part of the National Historic District. This is, again, one of the most understated of the buildings over there, but it still has some interesting features. The corner bay here, an additional bay on this side, and then the second building with the window banding and so forth. It kind of creates a harmonious composite. So this one also, the building to the north, has a very fancy entranceway and some nice detailing.
Just needs to be taken care of. It's a unique little building and should be really restored, but it's going to be in jeopardy because it's only a two-story building anchoring a corner there, but it's one of the buildings on the National Register with the Bryn Mawr Historic District. So we'll see what goes on because there's a big development north of this. There's open land now that the CTA tore down all those buildings just north of this. So hopefully we can restore this building and engage it into the new development just north of it here.
Obviously, we have more L stops on the Red Line than any other community in Chicago. We have 4, and that's great for foot traffic. So all these buildings, once the construction work is done, hopefully will have more revitalized commercial activity and so forth. I know there's a big task force meeting going on with the chamber and the Alderwoman's office on some of that. So hopefully we have some good things coming out of it. Some additional detailing work here. This is probably cast concrete, wouldn't you say, Tom?
Yeah, cast concrete. Or no, this could be carved limestone.
Carved limestone.
And here's a good example. These are tight mortar joints on this, probably like an 1/8-inch wide, very narrow mortar joints on it. Unfortunately, that's one of my pet peeves in architecture is always dye your mortar joints to match the brick. You know, you're not selling mortar, you're selling the brick. And of course here, you know, there's sort of spot tuck point and putting white mortar in, and now all you can see is the bad white, and the brick sort of gets lost in the world.
This is one we lost, much to our chagrin. You don't want to say anything about this one, Tom?
Well, originally an auto shop for the neighborhood, and it was actually an electric charging station for electric vehicles. You know, back in the turn of the century, everyone was going to electric vehicles. Henry Ford was creating electric battery-operated vehicles, and this was a charging station for those. Of course, gasoline went out over that world. But beautiful details in the brackets up on the top. We tried to save this building with the Howard Brown Center that was going to develop it, tore it down. I did drawings for how to do their design behind it and engage this into their development. And but that lost out. They paid no attention to our drawings and our walkthroughs that Bob Reamer and I did with the Howard Brown people to try to save this unique little building on the corner. Of course, the site's been leveled, there's a fence around it, and it's on the market again. So thanks for tearing down a building.
Yeah, Howard Brown does a lot of good work, but they're not perfect.
Orange-rated building.
It's an orange-rated building, you know. This one was the subject of, does anyone ever listen to WBEZ and that What's That Building segment on their local program? But Dennis Rodkin did a story on this because this is right at the intersection of Hollywood. So a lot of cars come by, you know, tens of thousands of cars come by this intersection every day. And they did a little poll on through that program, and this was a much beloved building. All these listeners at WBEZ had called in to say, you know, we got to save this building. But alas, I don't know that any of the architectural elements were saved. This was back during the COVID time, so you know, if we had a little more notice and a little more cooperation, maybe we could have at least salvaged some of the unusual detailing, like this ornamentation here, the very unusual bracketing and the mansard roof. Tom did beautiful drawings showing how you could save that facade and put it on even a very contemporary looking structure.
Electric charging stations.
So just moving further north, so now we've gotten north of that kind of big intersection of Hollywood and Broadway, which there isn't a whole lot left over there to talk about anymore, but that's some of the areas where the CTA has been staging the construction for the Red Line modernization, so that'll be becoming available soon. But a little further north on the west side of Broadway, the Exposition Carpet Company, which has been there for many, many years. The building goes back to the glory days of Motor Row. It was an automobile showroom originally. Beautiful, absolutely unique terracotta facade on this building. I don't know if you've ever noticed it before, but the next time you're walking around, if you're ever walking around over there, take a closer look. So this shows you these beautiful panels up on the above the showcase windows. They got these very unusual stylized ornamentation pieces, and the bracketing is also very, very Art Deco. With a lot of beautiful multicolored terracotta.
And this is interesting to see the evolution of what they call Art Deco, from this being not really, it's Art Deco, but it's got more foliage forms in it, and not a lot of, as you see later on with the Broadway antique building, that's Art Moderne. It goes into full geometry of Art Deco, versus this one still got a lot of foliage forming with a lot of classical sort of detailing on it. But very unique, all terracotta building, orange rated.
So this is a very unusual carving here. It's kind of like an astro meets foliage. Unfortunately, I think the most beautiful panel is somewhat obscured by the sign, but there you have a mermaid hiding behind the brackets.
This is about the same time period of some of the details you see on the Bell Shore apartment building on Bryn Mawr Avenue, the green building there. That sort of same sort of detail and symbolism.
Moving north, we have a couple of photos. One is on the left is just a larger image of the building in the photo on the right, but that is one of the original two flats that was constructed over there. I think it dates from the 1890s. Don't hold me to that, but has most of its architectural integrity, including the sheet metal cornice up there. So blends in nicely. It's got we just included this photo because it shows one of the newer buildings, which is just 1 story taller than the 2 flat, but then right next to the restaurant next door. The Mexican restaurant there, I don't know if that's an original facade, Tom. I think that
I don't think
might
so,
have
but
been.
I don't know the story on this thing here.
No.
If they did this, good for them to try to create detail and character and fit contextually in with the neighborhood. I think it's great.
Yeah.
And there are several buildings on Broadway that are residential buildings. There's this one, there's another Greystone, and a single family. So there's still some of the residential world still on Broadway Avenue, tucked back, of course, because it had setbacks back then.
So you get a real walk through history as you walk down the street. You see the various eras. This was this building you probably know well. It's originally the streetcar barn, and this was also designed by Mayer.
That's what we've researched so far. George Washington Mayer did this, who did many houses in the Winthrop Kenmore and Sheridan Road neighborhood, some 20, and I think there's only maybe a couple left. But he did this for Cochrane as a car barn to store cars from the mansions over on the east side. It doesn't seem like it's a Mayer building, because he did the Colvin house that you know at Thorndale and Sheridan. That's a George Washington Mayer house. He was very into symmetry. Not a lot of symmetry here, and he really wasn't into classical Corinthian details, so he must have did this early on in his career with Cochrane. Of course, it needs a lot of work, as you can tell, but it's an orange-rated building.
In the 1980s, it still had the sign Chicago Electric Street Railroad.
Huh. We obviously lost the cornice here, and then a lot of the windows were bricked up as well. It's being used for food storage, I believe, right now. There's a consortium of Asian food suppliers that store a lot in there. So
A beautiful detail. I think
you
you'll show
can
that.
see the tall CHA senior building just to the south of it, and the City of Chicago Streets and Sanitation Yard is just to the north. That's the chain link fence you see there, and that's going to be the site of a new 13-story affordable housing development through the Bickerdike Company. We believe that's going to be starting next year. I have a couple of photos that were in our original exhibit. This is showing one of the streetcars that's about to go into the car barn there. This is probably from the 1940s. It's unusual to have a color photo, but you see that the streetcars were colored orange, and you have another Chicago institution advertised on the side of that building, Jay's Potato Chips.
Since we're talking about Broadway, just to go back a little bit, Broadway Avenue wasn't always called, called it Broadway Avenue. It's called Broadway. There's no suffix on
Yes,
it.
it's the only street in Chicago that stands alone with one name.
But it was originally Evanston Avenue because it was a lead-in from the city of Chicago up to the city of Evanston. And of course, they changed the names in 1913. A lot of streets in the city of Chicago had their name changed. I don't know why in 1913.
It was a big consolidation effort because there had been numerous, we had a talk on that a few years ago by Bill Savage, the Northwestern professor, but yeah, there were, the same street had multiple names depending on where in the city it was all, whoever was building and the community named their own streets, but that was systematized in, back in 1913.
And it was named Broadway because of the New York and the grandeur of Broadway in New York that they really named it after. Of course, right after they named that, it became the automotive motor row world instead of the theater world. And of course, there's theaters coming back on Broadway now, so.
So that's just some of the original detailing. Here we have another motor row oriented building now being used as a storage facility, but it's another painted facade, original limestone facade, but at least they painted it in an interesting way to kind of highlight some of the art. I don't know if this would be art moderne or art deco, but
Yeah, it's right in the middle there. But there's some beautiful detail on this building. Unfortunately, you lose it with all its colors and everything that's painted, but there is some great detail on it. Unfortunately, this building with the, and you can see it here, some of the details on it. This building lands right in the middle of the new empty lot, basically from Bryn Mawr all the way to Hollywood. That whole lot that the CTA owns, so it's a major multi-acre site. This building lands right in the middle of it, and it's too bad because there could be an incredible master plan development for that whole site, but this building really breaks it into two pieces.
maybe it could be developed around this building.
Right, and repurposed.
Or a façadectomy, perhaps.
Right, exactly.
You can see the very iconic wheels with wings on them, which I think kind of spoke to people's imaginings on what the automobile would do for their lives. And I'm not exactly sure if these are representational figures up here. It looks like we got some leafing over here, but the very strong verticality of the building is emphasized by the columns here. So a nice central focus point for the building. There's a little closer look at those wheels with wings. Now there's another similar building a little further north as well, so we have a couple of those. Then of course the other, after St. Ida's, probably the most imposing structure on Broadway is the Broadway Armory. It was built and opened in 1917, I want to say. Was the Winter Garden ice skating rink. It was the largest indoor ice skating facility in the world, and it was a very posh enterprise. They had a number of bars and restaurants inside, and it was part of the boom time of this area. Broadway was a very major entertainment destination at that time. Had close access to the elevated train. Unfortunately, World War I put a kibosh on a lot of businesses in this area, and this was one of them. So it only lasted a couple of years as an ice skating emporium, and then thereafter was more or less taken over by the Illinois National Guard. There's a long story on how it eventually became a Park District facility. It was many of the founding members of the Edgewater Historical Society were involved with that fight with former Alderwoman Kathy Osterman. It was owned by the state of Illinois, subject to getting torn down when the state was in a difficult financial state in the 1990s, but through community support, it's been saved and repurposed as the largest indoor facility for the Chicago Park District. Thousands of people use it every day. So the Illinois National Guard, they were only in there for a portion of its history, but they still have their name above the doorway there.
Carved in stone, of course.
Carved in stone, but beautiful entryway to the facility. That large arched window there is very imposing. Lots of additional detailing on the building. It's obviously a very long brick wall along Broadway, but it's broken up nicely with the various entryways and the lamppost-like fixtures on the side, the Juliet balconies up on the second floor. So an example of how a very big building can be brought down to a more human scale through ornamentation. A lot of the development battles that we've fought in recent years, and Thom's been very good at this, forcing developers to try to do a little more with the facades of the buildings to make them a little more visually appealing and human scaled. We'll talk about some of the new buildings at the end. We're running a little short behind here, so we'll pick up the pace a bit more. Just again, some of the lovely, unusual brick detailing from the original garden. So one historic photo here as we're moving further north. This is the northwest corner of Thorndale and Broadway. There's the estate sale, resale shop in that store right now. But this is probably from the 1930s, I'm guessing, based on the automobiles. So very visually active street. We still have some of the buildings here. This building here is now where Indie Cafe is located, the Italian restaurant, and the great wine shop over there.
And up the street you can see, is that the Plymouth Auto dealership?
Yes, that big, no longer there, but that was from the Riviera Motors company at the next corner of Elmdale. And we'll take you there right now. That big sign is gone. For a time, the iron infrastructure to support it remained. I believe that's gone now. I walk by there every day. I can't swear to that, but this is probably the most elaborate building on the street. Just incredible ornamentation, and of course there are these enormous automobile showrooms, two-story showrooms that you could go up on those beautiful balconies and have a look out over the tops of the cars. So right now that's where the crew for the red purple line modernization is working. I don't know, once they're done with their work, what will happen with that space. This building is also owned by the Janulius family, our Secretary of State. It was their family that ran the now gone Broadway Bank that was in there for a number of years until the financial crash.
Amazing lobby and staircase in there. It's just a beautifully intact lobby in this building. And it is a city landmark building. It's the only one on Broadway. So this one should be preserved since it's a city landmark building. So it goes on, but we need to find a user for this building.
It's had a number of uses over the years. I don't know if anyone remembers, there was a crepe restaurant in there back in the 70s. What was the name of it?
Le Cafe.
Lou Cafe? La Cafe.
And the bank was there.
Auction
Broadway
studio
Bank.
too.
Jim Julius's wife ran a travel agency out of the first floor in there in the bank.
So again, what we have on the write-up on our website if you want to get more detail on that.
John, it was formerly an auction studio also, where a lot of the Balvin and Cat stuff was auctioned off from.
Okay. We have a lot of distinguished guests in our audience, including Jim over here, who's been the caretaker of the Uptown Theater on a pro bono basis for many, many years. So he deserves a round of applause as well. And then, of course, we have this building where we're having our program today.